Did you know that one of the main reasons entries in the Flavour Forecast Recipe Challenge do not make it into the final selection is because often they do not meet the brief of having only one discretionary recipe in the submission. Too many entries have more than one discretionary recipe. Now, what exactly do we mean by discretionary recipe? We are not talking about sweet versus savoury, as all recipes, whether sweet or savoury, can be developed to avoid falling into the discretionary category. My name is Leanne Compton and I'm one of the team of judges for the Flavour Forecast Recipe Challenge. When we're referring to discretionary recipes, we are mainly focusing on the amount and types of fat and consequently cooking methods and also the amounts of sugar. To get your head around what are healthy fats to consume and the amount of fat and sugars that are considered desirable in recipes, we need to use credible sources of information, for example, from the Commonwealth Government Eat for Health website or from accredited practicing dietitians. Do not listen to social media influencers, as they tend to be not university trained in nutrition and tend to promote information that may not be evidence-based. So let's delve a bit deeper into ensuring your entries are compliant with the design specifications in regard to discretionary recipes. When considering the types of fats to include, ensure that animal fats are used in very small quantities. Or even better, consider replacing them with mono or polyunsaturated oils. Olive oil is a monounsaturated fat and therefore considered beneficial for health. So if a recipe requires butter, explore ways to replace it with a healthier alternative such as olive oil. Generally, plant-based oils are considered healthy, but coconut oil is not considered healthy, and this is despite what ill-informed social media influencers say. So if you are using coconut oil, your dish most likely would be considered discretionary. So I would suggest using olive oil or a similar oil if you do not want your dish to be discretionary. If a recipe calls for frying in oil, consider adapting it to shallow frying in a monounsaturated or polyunsaturated oil, such as olive oil, or baking the ingredients in an oven and brushing with oil. So think about the cooking technique as well. Pastry made from butter is automatically a discretionary item, unless it's phyllo pastry brushed or made with olive oil. However, be mindful of the amount of olive oil used in the recipe, as too much can make it discretionary. It is generally advised that no more than 50 ml of olive oil is consumed per person per day. So note, this is not per dish or per recipe. So make sure to consider all sources of fat in the recipe. Just being a healthy fat doesn't mean the recipe will not be considered discretionary. For example, if a recipe includes several sources of good fats such as avocado, nuts and seeds, nut and seed butters, dark chocolate and olive oil, the overall quantity of fat is high and is likely to tip the recipe into that discretionary category. So try to aim for one source of good fats in a recipe, taking into consideration the amount being used. Also consider how high fat ingredients contribute to the recipe and explore ways to reduce the overall fat intake or content of your recipe. For instance, cheese is high in fat, so you might want to consider using a smaller amount of cheese or using a low-fat version of cheese or a lower-fat alternative like cottage cheese or ricotta if it was stating it needed cheddar cheese, for instance. Likewise, cream is high in fat, so consider alternatives. You might be looking at low-fat versions of cream, or you might be looking at including Greek yogurt, or thinking about using a smaller quantity of the cream. Other foods high in fat may include mayonnaise, coconut, processed meats such as bacon and prosciutto. Do your own research to find out what foods are high in fat when investigating possible recipes, and think about ways that you can reduce the overall fat intake, whether it is looking at low-fat alternatives of the ingredient or other alternatives, or using a smaller amount. Now let's talk about sugar. Sugar comes in a variety of forms: white sugar, caster sugar, brown sugar, and don't be tricked into thinking other types of sugar are better for you. Sugar is sugar, and despite what social media influencers may tell us, ingredients such as maple syrup, golden syrup, honey, coconut sugar, agave, date sugar, etc., are all sugars. You might consider using other sources of sweetness found in ingredients such as fruits like bananas and berries, or spices such as cinnamon and vanilla, because they will contribute sweetness into a dish. Sugar can be used in dishes, but be mindful of the amount used. You might also consider alternative sugars such as stevia and monk fruit sweetener, which may have different aftertastes in the end in the dish. So work through that in your experimenting to see what will work for your recipe. But keep in mind, sugar is sugar. It doesn't matter what form it comes in, whether it's maple syrup or whether it's white sugar or whether it's agave. It is all sugar. My final tip is to consider the other recipes being submitted in your entry. When you are working in your group or individually, discuss or identify which one recipe, if any, will be the discretionary recipe. This will make it easier when submitting the 3 recipes as part of your entry, as you will be clear from the beginning which recipe will be the discretionary one. Both you and your classmates in your group or you individually will know which recipe should be the discretionary recipe. So this means when you're working through the challenge, it will be clear which 2 recipes should not be discretionary, and considerations such as the amounts and types of fats, cooking methods, and amounts of sugar will be at the forefront of the planning and experimenting to ensure that these 2 recipes are not discretionary, because you have identified the one discretionary recipe. Use the design brief in the information about the Flavour Forecast Recipe Challenge to identify the specifications for each of the 3 trends. You need to submit 1 recipe for each trend. So for each trend, identify the set ingredients and/or cooking techniques and other requirements. This is clearly stated in the information provided in the table. Be clear from the start what is required for each recipe before you start your investigating, defining, generating and designing. So as you work through the design process, always go back and check that you are within the parameters to ensure your final recipes will meet the brief. As mentioned, use your classmates, your teacher and your parents to help keep you on track so that your entries will meet all of the requirements as stated in the information for the recipe challenge. Ensure you think about how your recipe will stand out from the crowd. Remember, although the set ingredients and techniques may be new to you, this does not make it stand out, as these are the specifications in the brief. So think about what else you can do to make your recipe unique. How can you demonstrate your skillfulness and how can you demonstrate your creativity? That's the bit that will make your recipe stand out from the crowd if you're able to solve or answer those questions. How can you be skillful, creative, and how can you make your recipe unique? So one last thought as a judge is that I've had the privilege of evaluating numerous recipe creations over the years. It's been a remarkable journey witnessing the creativity and learnings of students who not only showcase their skills, but also provide thoughtful justifications that delve into the essence of what connects them to their recipes that they present, as well as the insightful reflections about what they've learned through the recipe challenge. The creativity of the recipes presented by the students goes beyond just the mere combination of ingredients and cooking techniques. It reflects a deep understanding and appreciation of trends and the reasons behind their recipe choices. So each student dish tells a story to us as a judge, and the students have articulated the narrative behind their creations through their justifications. So these justifications provide a little window for us as judges into their inspiration, their motivations and their personal connections that have led them to create their own unique recipes. So the justifications are a really critical part of the recipe challenge. Likewise, their reflections offer insights into what the students have learnt along the way. So these reflections provide us as judges really valuable glimpses into the evolution of the students' culinary skills, the knowledges that they have accumulated over the recipe challenge. The reflections often document the students' growth and showcase their development of their techniques, flavour profiles and overall culinary expertise. So they don't merely present the recipes. What the students are doing is sharing their stories of experimentation, adaptation and refinement through their reflections. So it becomes a narrative of the challenges overcome, the lessons learned, both from successes and failures, and the dedication required to really hone their cooking skills. So as a judge, I really want to emphasise the importance of the justifications and reflections, because that adds a layer of depth to the evaluation process that goes just beyond the recipes themselves. So I really want to emphasise the importance of students writing justifications and reflections that portray their learnings in the recipe challenge as well. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this video about tips from judges. Hopefully you've got some valuable insights into what the judges are looking for. I cannot emphasise enough to go back to the design brief and to ensure that that is followed. But I wish you all the very, very best for this year's Flavour Forecast Challenge. Any questions or queries, please email Meredith directly and I'm sure she'll get back to you. And I hope to see your students' entries in this year's judging. So thank you and all the best.